I want to emphasize that phase one, that whole planning phase, is something that most organizations go through very fast and don't pay attention to. It's probably the most important part of the whole operation. We skipped over it too very fast, but I want to emphasize the importance of that. Phase three in our streamlining processes is certainly the flow chart, the process, or the many different types of phase two. Phase two, activity one, flow chart, the process. Here we can use many different types of flow charts. I like to use a knowledge flow chart. I like to use an activity flow chart. We can use all types. Here we're really collecting variables data. And you don't want to just collect average cycle times. You've got to look at the extremes as you go through at each activity. We'll also, in activity two, we'll do a benchmark study to collect what are the best practices to do right to this. We want to be able to be sure that we're at least going to be come out with a result that's going to hit the best practices. So here we're not going to do more than do a benchmark which says how good should this process be. We want to challenge the targets that we're setting for us. Activity three is to do a process walkthrough. That's where you come through. A lot of people make a big mistake here. What they do is they start at the beginning of the process and go through to the end, and that's absolutely wrong. You start at the customer and go backwards, so you've always talked to the customer of the one that you're interviewing, so you know what's required when you're doing it there. And that's a very important step. From there, you can talk about collecting all the costs and time cycle of the as-is process, and we end up with something that I consider absolutely crucial, and that's prepare a simulation model of the as-is process. The simulation model is the only way you can do a Monte Carlo analysis that you can truly understand what is the potential variation in that process. You don't lose customers over averages. You lose customers over the extremes. And if you can't understand what happens when you go into the summer cycle to that process, or when the orders come in around Christmas, this is where simulation modeling is absolutely essential. So very important part. By that time, you're back to activity 6, where you, from going through at this point in time, you'll find many, many things that you're doing, what I call dumb things, things you just obviously should stop doing. And just get rid of the quick fixes. And typically at this step, you will have more quick fixes as things that you can do right away will pay for the entire activity that's going on. So this is wonderful because you get results very quickly. And that makes management really happy. You need to develop at that point in time a cultural model of that process, because when we get through, we want a process that's going to fit the culture of the organization, and not just the total organization, but the individual parts of the organization that's involved in this process. So you need a cultural model that you'll develop here, and at the last is a toll gate. Now we're going to move into the one that I'm going to try to delve in a little bit deeper. This is the heart of it, and this is the streamline process itself. Typically, let me just back up just a little bit. Coming out of this activity, when you start looking at developing cost and cycle time, we're really, in each case, we're doing minimum, maximum, and average, because this is what we're going to feed into our simulation model so we can do our calculations. And you cannot assume that's a normal distribution, because in our service sector, most of them is non-normal. We're looking at very skewed distributions almost in all of the service activities, the support activities. When I talked about the importance of simulation modeling, I really want to emphasize that. It's an absolutely essential part. And what it does, it allows you to take all the assumptions of the variation that occurs throughout the year. And we know summertime things slow down because people are on vacation, people are out sick, we're doing budgets. So you've got to take all that into consideration when you're designing the process. These are sort of the things that you'll see in these simulation models. Very different than what we're seeing in the flowchart. You know, we got splits, we got gates, we got batching. These are the things that really happen. And when we start doing flowcharts, you don't have any of this capabilities. So very important, the simulation modeling. And that way you can actually talk about how many stations do we have, where does the buildup occur, how does the different things impact that process as we go forward. This is a typical example that we had where we've seen 7.5 million annual savings because they simulated the processes that they were going to go out. The nice part about simulation modeling, we're going to use that all the way through the streamlining process, because when we decide we're going to change it, we'll go to the simulation model and we'll say, if we make this change, how will this impact the total process? So we can actually look at individual parts as we look at, should we do this or shouldn't we? Again, the cultural model, very important phase, because you've got to fit the culture of the people that's working in production control, in manufacturing, the individual area that you're working in, because the culture, the subculture within the company is a very important part of a process focus. And you know, what we actually do in doing that, there's a number of ways, the analysis techniques that's available, organizational design impact assessments, organization fitness analysis. There's a number of excellent tools that we found to do this modeling. Thirdly, we're talking about how the management styles change. And you know, the manager in one department is very different than the manager in another department. The organizational structure, how they're put together, the compensation and reward structure. So these are the sort of things that you have to look at. Reward structure is very different in sales than it is in production control, and you have to consider that. And truly, then, that drives the behavior pattern. And when we get all the way through, what are we trying to do when we talk about improvement? We're talking about changing behavioral patterns. And so this whole cultural model is an absolutely essential part when we start talking about upgrading our processes. Let me look at this phase 3, which is the streamlining process. Here we're going to, in activity 1, we're going to look at applying streamlining approaches, and this is a crucial area that we're working with. There are 4 potentials that can be adjusted when we start talking about optimizing performance. We can take equipment and we can optimize the equipment, which includes software. The operating procedures, we can optimize them. We can optimize our controls, and we can optimize the culture. You got to focus on all 4. Too often we focus on optimizing the operating procedures without looking at all 4. If you look at Six Sigma, we really have completely ignored the IT portion of it. You know, we don't even look at that as a competency. And you cannot improve any process without considering information technology. So you really have to be looking at all 4, and that's what we're doing with streamlining. Each symbol on your flowchart certainly is an opportunity for improvement. You know, an operation symbol, a decision symbol, an inspection symbol. You look at these individual symbols, and each one of these are opportunities for improvement.